Hey, welcome to Unsolicited Fatties Talk Back, the podcast where fat people talk back to neurotypicality. I am one of your hosts, Deshaun Harrison.
I'm Mikey Mercedes.
I'm Jordan Underwood.
I'm Caleb Luna.
I'm Brian Guffey.
And we're the Fatties. I like it, Picasso.
Picasso.
One brief content note for this episode today. I will be leaving early, so if you wonder where I am in the back half of the episode, don't worry. I did not get eaten by my computer or fall off a cliff. I am fine. I just had to go do other things. Now, moving on, Caleb, can you go ahead and get us oriented for this episode?
Yeah. So this episode, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We were invited by Doug Belcher of Autism Personal Coach to record a special episode for an event he's organizing for Autism Acceptance Day on April 2nd. The event is called Stimmy Vibrations, and it's a day-long virtual event that highlights autistic podcasters. And since I, Caleb, am autistic, and all of us are neurodivergent in some way, we thought it'd be a wonderful opportunity to discuss fatness and neurodivergence. But first, Mikey's gonna lead our first segment.
Okay, guys, let's get real for a second. All right. We often talk about foods we really love on this show, and we try to be positive about foods because food's good. Why would you want to hurt food? Food did nothing wrong. However, this episode, we will be discussing foods we hate. Who wants to go first?
I will go first, actually, because I have a very strong opinion about this, and it's impacting me greatly these days, which is that I hate yogurt, and I hate it so much.
I support you, Jordan. I support you.
Thank you, because it's there's actually, if you didn't know about yogurt, there's alive germs in it, and that is really gross to me. So that's disgusting. And if I can't believe it. I had to be on antibiotics for like a minute because I had strep throat, and then like literally like I swear to God, I'm like pretty sure I got like my skin has been really fucked up since then, and my doctor was like, you need to eat yogurt or take probiotic, and I was like, I would rather die than eat yogurt, actually. I'd rather die. I'd rather jump out my window. And I only live on the second floor, so like obviously I wouldn't die if I jumped out of my window, but I don't want that. So I settled for frozen yogurt, and I got some Pinkberry, which also has probiotics in it. But you know, I also
Jordan,
really don't like,
when does this end?
I also don't like bananas. The thing is that we're like in Pinkberry, like it's frozen. So like because they're alive, but they're frozen. So like I feel like they're not like wiggling around.
I wish y'all could see Deshaun's face.
Oh my God.
They look incredulous.
I was so offended when they said they don't like bananas.
Right.
I hate bananas. Bananas give me a tummy ache, and they taste nasty. I'm sorry,
I don't
Deshaun.
like the texture.
What?
I'm
I
sorry.
also don't like the smell. I don't like anything about them.
Can we still be
I-
friends?
I literally
This is just not
realized,
computing for me.
I love
Frozen.
bananas too. It's okay.
Jordan, your share made me realize that frozen yogurt is yogurt that's been frozen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Had not put that together.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Interesting. I wonder what else I'm going to learn today.
Wow. So true.
So I'll share with y'all. I am actually, I don't know if I have any foods that I hate, which is really wild.
Brian, I don't believe you. I'm sorry. I don't.
I
Not
know,
for a
dig
second.
deep in your soul.
You need to figure this out right
But
now.
you
You
are
need to
the-
figure it out.
You are the one that wanted like sauerkraut balls, which I do feel like is like on the periphery of a spectrum of flavors. If you
I mean,
catch
That
my
was so
drift.
diplomatic. A spectrum of
Thank
flavors.
you.
So I mean, I guess like, oh, man, I don't know. I don't know if they're. Wait, no, okay. Cauliflower,
Yeah.
raw. I will eat cooked cauliflower, but raw cauliflower, no, thank you. No, thank you.
Wait,
no, thank you.
I thought you said call the flower, and I'm like, what
Oh.
flower?
Cauliflower.
Yes.
I can't do or broccoli. It's both of them.
Oh my
The
God!
way
You
that
know
they,
who?
like,
Have you seen? Have you seen Shelby's posts about cauliflower
no.
on
Even if you
Instagram?
have it with, even if you have it with some dip, you don't like
Fit,
it.
flexible,
it's-
fluid. Like she posts like the worst cauliflower things.
I
I'm
can't
pretty
with
sure.
cauliflower or like raw cauliflower or broccoli because like it all just like falls apart in your mouth weirdly.
Yeah.
And like there's just like bits and pieces of it like floating in your mouth and you find it like later caught in a tooth somewhere or like in your gut. I hate it.
I like
hate
broccoli
it.
though. You
were
tripping?
Yeah,
No,
I like
just raw
broccoli.
broccoli. Cooked broccoli I love.
I
Mm,
love
I-
some steamed broccoli.
I am yet again offended.
Me too.
Um,
You love a raw broccoli?
I love broccoli in all its forms.
Same.
I love a
Same.
cooked broccoli.
Yes, I would eat broccoli. You know, if Dr. Seuss, who I know is, canceled, we hate him. But if Dr. Seuss,
Dr. Seuss did like Dr. Seuss was like penitent about what he said originally before he died. Like he wrote a whole thing about how he was a bad person.
yes,
He did accountability.
yes, that's cute.
He's
But
still a white man though.
the only reason why I'm bringing him up is it's not even relevant
I
to
know
him.
I
If
know
he
why.
wrote
Yep.
green eggs and ham for broccoli and broccoli, that would be about my life. Because
Wait,
I love broccoli that much. So
Wait.
now I'm gonna mute myself.
But green eggs and ham is about
It's
somebody
about
who
not
won't
liking
eat green
it.
eggs and ham.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's true. But so let's just say he wrote the opposite. And that and
Okay.
it
So
was
a
called
completely
He
broccoli-
wrote a
different
different book entirely.
Different book that was
Deshaun.
completely
Exactly.
unrelated.
Exactly.
This is an excellent segue into what is the food that you would be writing a green eggs and ham book about?
Yeah. What do you
yes.
hate?
Oh, great, great
It
brand.
would no, truly great. We love that. It
So
would
smooth.
absolutely be squash and zucchini.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Yes.
I hate
Oh.
both. However, anytime I think about zucchini, I don't know if all of you will remember this because we're not all part of the same generation. But
Thank you.
when I was growing up watching Disney Channel, there would be like these little like around the world little like segments or whatever.
yes.
And this one kid from
remember.
I think France, he was like zucchini or something like
Yes,
that. And I
win!
always think about that one fucking video
Unlocked memory.
every single time.
You just
Okay. Wait.
Zucchini.
Hold on.
Unlocked-
There is a squash
unlocked memory.
that I have to make an excuse for, and that's just like aoyama, or like some people call it calabaza, but that's the stuff they like put it in beans. for rice and beans.
Kielbasa.
No.
No,
I
not kielbasa.
Sausage.
It goes in there.
I
You don't
don't
actually
care
taste
what
it.
form-
It's the texture mostly.
I can't. I'm so excited that we're having this conversation today because we're going to get to talk about how Jordan is absolutely ADHD, just undiagnosed. This is okay,
Oh,
and it's not even
maybe.
self-diagnosis, Jordan. It's community diagnosis.
Community
Me,
diagnosis.
your friends who love
ADHD.
So
you.
true.
ADHD is the last Pokemon of neurodivergent stuff that Jordan
Oh my
has
god.
in order to be the very best, like no one ever was.
I'm dead.
Mikey, have you shared your hated food yet?
Ooh, okay, because the thing is, I really hate zucchini. Like, I really
Okay.
do hate zucchini.
As you
There
should.
was like a period where like everybody was making like noodles out of zucchini, like
Yes.
they would spiralize them
Noodles.
and shit. Fuck that.
Yes.
Okay, that is not noodles. It's bullshit. All right, no. Okay, I have a lot of feelings. I have a lot
How
of feelings.
dare they
about
take the
zucchini.
carbs out of noodles?
Like,
I agree.
what? Noodles are like one of the single most perfect food categories in
It's
existence.
giving white. I don't know. It's giving white.
Speaking of zucchini,
What?
I just sorry, this is not gonna aid well in my defense of me not having ADHD, but I can't stop thinking about did any of you watch Veggie Tales?
Yes, of course.
Like that Christian propaganda.
Yes, of course. And I loved it.
Slavery. What was
I
it
believe-
again?
I just can't stop thinking about it during this conversation.
I never watched Veggie Tales, but I've seen some videos on the internet from people making jokes and shit. And also I know Martin's watched a lot of Veggie Tales because he had a whole religious phase. But
Yeah.
that
No,
show
it's
is
bad.
wild.
But what I was saying to you, Mikey, was that people making zucchini into noodles just gives very white. It just seems
Yeah.
very white.
It's very white and very sad. But I don't know if I hate zucchini more than I hate anything else that I hate. Y'all are gonna drag me for this.
Mm.
I don't like coconut.
I don't either.
I'm not dragging you because I hate coconut. Everything about it is disgusting.
The
What?
flavor or the flakes or
The
all of it.
texture, the flavor. I don't like coconut water. Don't like German chocolate cake. Don't like anything. I can't do coconut at all. It's the texture, the taste, just disturbing, perplexing.
Oh,
Thank you, Mikey, for bringing me to this truth in this moment.
disturbing.
I recently bought coconut ice cream and I did not finish it because it was gross.
Whoa.
And yeah, I thought it would be.
Whoa.
I thought I would like it more than I did.
do you like coconut
I
and other
love
things?
a coconut.
No,
Wow.
but sometimes the flavor is not I just wasn't sure how strong the
thing is,
coconut flavor would be.
Coconut is the kind of thing that's useful only for if you're making rice and peas, Jamaican rice and peas, you need coconut water. That makes sense. I mean, you need coconut milk, but
coconut water doesn't taste like coconut. In
It tastes
the artificial
disgusting.
sense.
I hate coconuts so much that I will lie to people and tell them that I have a coconut allergy just so I can avoid having to eat anything with coconut in it.
Wow.
God.
Respect.
I love this.
I hate coconut.
Thank
So if you ever hear me
God.
say I have a coconut allergy to you, it's not true. It's just that I don't want to try your food because I hate coconut. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
That's fair.
Well, you could just tell us that you don't like coconut. We'll understand.
I do
Okay,
like
right.
coconut, but
Same.
I respect people who do not like coconut because I feel like it is kind of an intense flavor. And also this is the other flavor that I really hate is coconut in drinks specifically. I feel like it tastes like sunscreen.
Oh my God.
What does sunscreen taste?
It tastes it tastes like those sunscreen that are the ones that are supposed to smell like tropical.
Oh my God, Jordan.
It tastes like those sunscreen and I really don't like it.
I have an unrelated thing, but you made me think of it with your sunscreen weirdness going on right now. Does anyone have trouble tasting with tasting certain flavors that aren't actually there? For me, every single time I've had Burger King, I've tasted shampoo and I don't know why.
Whoa, the cilantro thing?
no, because I can eat
some
cilantro. I
people-
love cilantro.
No, but I know, but it's
Oh yeah, but
similar.
that.
It's
It's literally like
but
that, but only for Burger King somehow. I don't understand why.
Weird.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Something I hate is
Tell us.
onions.
Whoa.
Which-
Oh my God, same.
What?
Yeah. And like, as I've mentioned on this podcast before, I love a burger, so I always have to ask them for no onions. And like, I had onions recently because like onion is such a strong flavor. It's like you can, if it comes with my burger and I remove the onion, I can like still taste the onion.
Still taste it. Yes.
Yeah. But I actually ate I was gonna say an onion burger, but a burger with onions the other day because my roommate got it for free via a Postmates mix up. And so I just like gobbled it, swallowed it down, and it had onions on it. And I was like, the onion taste actually wasn't terrible, but it was my breath after. I just like, it was like, you know, you can just like fucking smell, like feel the onions.
Like raw onions? Like raw onions or like any kind of, because I feel like raw onions versus like cooked onions versus like sauteed onions, they all have very like different flavors to me.
I do love a Funyun. I'll start there.
Sure. Or like a onion ring. I don't really like an onion ring, but I will eat the batter and leave the onion. Yum.
But I don't like if an onion is like, if it's like in like it's like chopped up and in the dish, you know, like with other spices and vegetables, like that's fine. If it's like part of a like symphony of flavors, like it's not gonna bother me. But if it's just
it's in like a pico de gallo, are you like,
oh, I don't really eat pico de gallo.
Okay, or like other, I'm trying to think of like other like,
I'm like, there's like, so like onions are in like every Mexican food ever. So I'm like, how have you lived?
I know
like
my
this
life is very difficult. I've suffered.
What? Wow.
Well, I stand in solidarity with you. Black and brown solidarity.
I can't. I'm sorry. I love onions. Onions are like.
I also hate onions, and I will have them removed from my burger. I will have them removed from anything that I can have them removed from, because like it's just like when you bite into anything that onions are in, all you taste are the onion, but also all you like feel is the crunch of an onion. And it's just like, no, I don't want this. I want this to disappear. I don't like it. No Picasso. So like, Caleb, I just completely relate to you, and you know, black and brown solidarity.
You know what you reminded me of just now?
I saw Mr. Grinch. I'll eat an onion raw.
Oh my god. Okay. I saw on TikTok the other day.
You just have to. Oh, go ahead, Mikey.
Oh no, I was gonna say I saw on TikTok the other day that apparently if you have onion smell left on your hands after holding an onion, you can rub a silver spoon on it and the smell will go away.
That makes sense because there is probably,
explain it to me, Ryan.
Is like good hold on. Odor remover, silver onion odor remover. Why does this work? How stainless steel removes odors. Basically, the sulfur from the onion is attracted to and binds with one or more of the metals in stainless steel. Like, so it's a science thing. Onions and garlic contain amino acid sulfoxides, which form sulfenic acids, which then form a volatile gas, which is what gives us the smell. I regret this. And so it just gets stuck onto the knife.
There's a reason why I didn't go to med school. Go ahead.
I just want to say before, like, you know, this has nothing to do with food at all. So whatever. But Brian, while you're sitting here in this blue shirt, like behind the screen, you remind me so much of Wade from Kim Possible. And that is a compliment. That is a compliment. Okay. Okay, well, you should watch it. Wade is like the coolest, most badass tech geek in the world, And I like, this is
I
genuinely a
see him.
compliment.
Yes.
I love him. Like, and you're just like with the microphone in front of you.
Oh my
and I
God.
can hear the blackboard behind you, like the whiteboard behind you, and you're like on your laptop, like on your computer, just like typing away, and it's giving Wade. So I live for it.
Him,
I see-
Dragon's
yes,
getting
I like that.
away. Oh,
Okay.
I miss Kim Possible so much.
On that note, we'll pivot to our main topic today, which is fatness and neurodivergence. And I think it would be good for us to go around and talk about our relationships and neurodivergence. Does somebody want to go first?
I vote Joe's so they can talk about their ADHD.
Yeah.
I literally do not have ADHD. However, I do not also have a filter. So I think that that's fine. I mean, I might have ADHD. Who's to say? I don't think that I do, but clearly this group of people.
This group of people.
Wow.
Wow.
Things that I do.
I'm sorry,
no.
Jordan. Did you say you people?
She said this group of people. They said this group of people.
I said this group of people, things that I do. So okay, it's fine. But no, so I have diagnosed borderline personality disorder, mood disorder not otherwise specified, which I looked up once, and apparently that's actually not in the DSM anymore. And
What
it
does
means
that
that it means that I either have like a depressive mood disorder or a bipolar mood disorder. And based on the symptoms, my friend and I were like, oh, I think I have the bipolar one, but I don't care enough to ask my doctor. So I'm one of those. I have a generalized anxiety disorder. That might be it. Those might be my big three. And then in the past, I have previously had like major depressive disorder, and I mean that's kind of it. Also kind of like relevant is like I've been hospitalized for my neurodivergencies, which I feel like is relevant to the conversation only as far as it becomes relevant, but like to reduce that stigma. So yeah.
Yes,
Oh.
hashtag reduce that stigma.
Hashtag reduce that stigma.
I will go next. I have severe ADHD. I was held back between I went from kindergarten to developmental first grade to then first grade because I couldn't sit still in my chair. And that's the year they diagnosed me with ADHD. With that comes sort of the attendant comorbid disorders that come with ADHD, like rejection sensitive disorder, and some of, like I have auditory processing disorder. So, and then I have generalized anxiety disorder. And I think that is, and illness anxiety disorder. So my brain is certain that I am always going to die from something. Constant.
I've never been diagnosed, but I also think that I have auditory processing disorder. It's something that I have self-diagnosed with for many, many years, and I have yet to seek an official diagnosis, but I'm pretty sure.
Deshaun, Mikey, would you like to go?
Yes. I don't know why I said it with the lisp. Whatever. I also have several different disorders. So I have several severe anxiety disorders. Like my anxiety is so bad, and has been for years. I also have major depressive disorder, which I have also been diagnosed with since I was 8 or 9 years old. And I know that some people don't necessarily count eating disorders as like mental illnesses or like cognitive illnesses, but I do.
Even though they
And
are. They are.
right, exactly. um and so yeah, I also have struggled with disordered eating since I was a child as well. And so I have just like very significant relationships with neurodivergence and with varying mental illnesses. And I also will name, for the sake of this conversation, that I've been hospitalized for my depression. And I think it's relevant to the conversation because one of the reasons that I became an abolitionist is because of how I was treated in that facility as a fat person, as a fat Black person, and the ways that mental, quote unquote, mental health facilities or mental hospitals really do mirror prisons in so many ways.
Absolutely. I was most recently diagnosed with ADHD. That was last year, I think. And then a little before that, I was diagnosed with CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And I've also struggled with disordered eating and an eating disorder since I was like 10. And all of the weird correlated things and issues that sort of linger in between those disorders. I haven't been hospitalized, but I have been extremely mistreated by psychiatric professionals on different grounds for different reasons. So yeah, but that's me.
I have a question really quickly. Are we also including undiagnosed things or no?
I mean, I have to because I have yet to get a specific diagnosis
I mean,
for
no,
my
same.
eating disorder. It's like, at this point, what does a diagnosis from a physician really mean except for that you got past the gatekeeper?
Right.
So literally, I think whatever. I think it's important to include, and we can say like, I think that's something we can also talk about, right? Like we should talk about.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna ask, and Brian. Okay, great. I was gonna say, like, I know Brian has to go, so I don't know if they were like waiting to say anything or not. But I was gonna ask because I have long believed that I am autistic and have done like several different like of the online quizzes and things like that, and have watched different like shows and things like that around autism. But because of the fact that well, there are a lot of I think reasons for why I've never been to a physician to be diagnosed, but in every iteration of like explanations of what like a quote unquote high functioning autistic person functions like, I fit the bill. And so I also just want to name that for folks, particularly Black folks who for varying reasons have not been diagnosed.
I also have an eating disorder. I keep on adding things because I keep on forgetting, and then everyone says their own, and then I'm like, oh, I have that too. Yeah.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, this is Caleb again. I got a formal diagnosis for autism last April, so about a year ago. And before that, I had identified with ADHD, and I learned that I actually was diagnosed with ADHD as a child. But my memory of that interaction was being prescribed Ritalin and being told, I remember the doctor saying, like, this is also an appetite suppressant, so it'll be really good for you. And so I just like didn't, that was like I thought I was being prescribed Ritalin as an appetite suppressant, not for ADHD.
Right.
This was also like in the 90s. So, our understanding of ADHD was very different. And I remember a kid in my class who had ADHD, although it was called ADD at the time. And he was very thin and just like nonstop moving around. And so like there was that component also where that was the picture of ADD at the time. And as somebody who, I mean, I've always been a bit of a sedentary person. I have a Taurus moon. So as somebody who was not quite as active and also not thin, there was a part of me that didn't recognize myself in ADHD symptoms until I got much older. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? And so I identified with ADHD for several years and like was, took Adderall, and it was an experience where it just like helped me focus and didn't like, the sort of neurotypical trope of Adderall as like speed. That's not how it impacts me. But I got a formal diagnosis last year also with my autism diagnosis. I also have CPTSD and depression, and I don't think I have an anxiety disorder, and actually that's interesting because I like right before my autism diagnosis, I was coming to terms with my anxiety. I was like coming into more awareness around my anxiety, and after receiving my diagnosis, began to understand that it was actually like that my anxiety was deeply related to masking, and like that was actually like what I was experiencing was just like deep embodied resistance to being forced to mask. And obviously, as somebody who was diagnosed late, I have a lot of trauma around masking. And I remember like when I asked, because first I asked my therapist about if like I think like Deshawn, I had questions for at different points in my life if I had autism. But I had like, and in retrospect, like I really struggled with self-assurance and self-awareness because I just felt so different from everybody. And so I trusted other people a lot more than myself. And so I asked like several people if they thought I had autism, and they all were like, no, including my therapist, who was just like, this isn't autism, this is trauma. This is like all of your autistic symptoms could also be explained by CPTSD. And so there's like real questions about like where those lines are drawn. And I don't think that like any of these diagnoses are in any way like an objective material reality. Right, they're all just like clusters of different behaviors that get pathologized and categorized into different symptoms.
Yeah.
But I did talk to the psychiatrist about that, or the practitioner who diagnosed me. I was like, this is what my therapist says, so like where does that fit in? And they told me they were like, I think you have trauma, but you also have trauma from masking. Like one of the things that I talked about in my appointment was what I didn't realize was stimming, but it's actually a very common autistic stim, and like being bullied out of expressing that by a very important person in my life, a longtime friend. And so there are like moments like that I'm sort of returning to and integrating as I learn more about autism and understand my past experiences more, which kind of brings me to a thread that I wrote a while ago that I wanted to read just to maybe ground our conversation a little bit. And it's interesting because we recently recorded an episode about fatness and disability, and of course neurodivergence is part of disability, but it was not the focus of that episode. But I think Brian said something in that episode that really I really identified with, and that this thread speaks to as well. So I'll just read it really quickly. And this is from September of 2021. Thinking on how my undiagnosed autism interacted with my race, class, and size. All my life, people have treated me as if I'm just stupid. My struggles interpreted as inevitabilities of my social locations, justifying my punishment in perpetuity. My punishment in perpetuity. I don't even know if I'm saying that word right.
Perpetuity. You got it.
Perpetuity. Thank you. I was surprised after receiving diagnosis how infantile the white autistics I would see in representation were treated. Partially because I already know so many autistics and our incredibly varying capacities, I'm related to some, but also because that had not been my experience. This is also not to say that the autistic experience is not an inherently violent one in an ableist culture, because it is. And I know that being diagnosed earlier would have only exposed me to other violences in addition to answers. It has also just given me another insight into racial fat phobia. My body so often being read as the product of some other innate inferiority, which was often merely my autism expressing in a manner that led to confusion or misspeaking on my end. The implication always being, I am too inept to appropriately perform the rigor of the thin body, so taken for granted as a brown child of poor parents. This script transfers to holistic fat people as well, across lines of race, class, and gender. So what I'm speaking to there is the ways that, as an autistic person, and especially an undiagnosed autistic person, like, you make a lot of mistakes, you misread social cues quite a bit, and that happened to me all throughout my life. And whenever that happened to me, it was always as if like, oh yes, this is like a fat person that doesn't know how to behave in society, and they're obviously fat because they don't know how to behave, right? So it felt like this, like my body was used as this sort of like physical representation of my like ineptness, right? Rather than the possibility that I could have, that something else could have been going on, particularly because I did really well in school, which is weird. But like, it's also like, I think important to talk about, like, as somebody, like, I've never wondered if I'm smart. Like, that's like an area of my life that like has always been affirmed for me. And I recognize that is not true of everyone. So I think that's like an important privilege to name. But it also, like, I was always like, oh, I'm book smart, but not street smart, because like, I don't know how to interact with people. And it would come out in all these different ways. So I've been talking quite a bit, but that is our sort of like entry point into this conversation on fatness and neurodivergence. And I was wondering if anybody else had anything to.
I really related to what you said about like your body being like the physical manifestation of, like, what did Caleb say? Just as they go to pee. But like their body being the physical manifestation of like not fitting in, or like not understanding, and like whatever these things, like, as someone who is like a fat person, a fat femme person with borderline, I felt very similarly, where it was like my body was too much and my emotions were too much, and the too muchness was always like like it always came back to my body, where like it was like, if you could just contain yourself, then things would be better, emotionally, physically, in any kind of way. And I think that's a pretty common experience, like, for fat folks, just across the board, right? Like it always kind of comes back to that. Yeah, but I have like very vivid memories of like me like having like full temper tantrums like on the floor as like a 16-year-old that were like not normal. And like, what is normal? But like, no, but like really not normal emotions. And like that being like coming from like a fat adolescent person, like just being like, it's just like all too much. And like, how do we contain this, as opposed to like, maybe something is not right. Like maybe there's something that's not clicking in the developmental way, in the emotional way that it's supposed to.
Yeah. I remember being a kid. Thank you both, Caleb and Joe, for sharing those experiences. I remember being a kid, and similarly to you, Caleb, I was great in school. I got, A's all the time, and I was one of those kids who complained about getting an A- or a B+. Like that was
both
the type
of you. I was such a dum-dum. I was
that
always
was the
so
type
insecure.
of no, I feel that. That was the type of student that I was, but I did not I did not socialize with other people very well at all. And at first it was chalked up to because I'm a twin. And so my twin brother, like he was very outgoing, very much a socialite. And I was not. So at first it was, very chalked up to that. But I remember like all throughout kindergarten through 8th grade, really, some of 9th grade too, I would always be the kid who was either like really quiet and kept to myself or my group of friends, or I had major outbursts because it was like teachers, of course, like it was like teachers, principals, other students, whomever, like would just treat me a very particular type of way that didn't allow me to be who I needed to be in the classroom and outside of the classroom. And that was oftentimes, like my behavior was often chalked up to my size, but also it was chalked up to me being Black. They were like, I had mostly white teachers, and they're like, here's this Black student from this poor neighborhood who doesn't respect authority, who doesn't care about what we have to say to them, to him, of course, at the time. But like there was no care or regard for, or even the possibility that I could be showing up as someone who was neurodivergent. It was only about the fact that I was this fat Black kid who had outbursts, who was being disruptive in a sea of white children. Because of course I was also in like AP and honors courses. So there were white kids who come from middle class backgrounds, who come from upper class like backgrounds, who don't have any sort of like relatability with regards to me and my experience. And then, as a kid in K through 5 and 6th through 8th grade, before I was in necessarily like honors and AP courses, I was still a student who was in like classes that were assigned to smarter kids. And I'm using quotation marks for folks who can't see me, because some of the smartest kids I knew were not in those classrooms with me because they were Black and from the hood, just like I was. And therefore their test results did not match the stats that they were supposed to match. But anyway, and so like you, Caleb, so much of your experience is very similar to mine, but I didn't believe myself to not be street smart. I was always told that I wasn't street smart, right? Like my stepdad in particular would always say, like, my stepdad and my mom would adapt this language at some point too, where they would just be like, like you're so smart, you're so book smart, but you're not street smart, or you don't have any common sense, or things like that. That would really irk me, because I'm like, well, I don't know how else I'm supposed to show up. Like, I have no idea what you're expecting of me, but I know that this is how I'm showing up the best I know how. Like, what else am I supposed to do? And just reflecting on, okay, so I know that there's critiques about this show. I know. But the show Atypical did a lot of good things for me. And the show is about a thin, cis, white boy from a middle-class family. So obviously not mirroring my experience at all. But seeing sort of the ways that he was engaged with, and then adding my experience as a fat Black person onto that, really gave me a lot of context as to why I was experiencing so much of what I was experiencing as a kid, and the ways that I was sort of coerced into doing something else, into showing up in a very different way, because I had no other option. It was that or be harassed and bullied and picked on for the rest of your life. So growing up, I thought a lot as a kid, because I always felt like I had to defend myself, and also like people won't leave me alone. So I was like a popular kid amongst people, but also was a kid who was outspoken, because when it came to like controversy, because everything about how I showed up in the world was controversial. And, I never really got the understanding until really last year that, like, yeah, so much of it was anti-Blackness and so much of it was anti-fatness, but also a lot of it was ableism. And I had no language for that, because I come from a family, like the only person in my family who is diagnosed, who has like a formal diagnosis of her autism, is my younger cousin. And I remember when my family first took her to the doctor and she first got diagnosed, everyone was like, no, that's not true. Like God is God is in control. Like, I come from a very, very Black South, Black Christian home where any form of like disability or quote unquote illness or condition is something that's not quote unquote of God. And so like there was just so much like aversion to her being diagnosed as autistic. And I remember like hearing what they would say, and I always, like I said, had thoughts that I was like maybe autistic. And so hearing like how they would respond to her being diagnosed as autistic made clear for me why that was never a possibility for me, which then made clear for me why like getting a formal diagnosis around my eating disorder was also not a possibility for me, which then made clear why like the only reason why I got a formal diagnosis around my anxiety and my depression is because my mom got afraid as a child after my first suicide attempt. Right. So like there was like, it just gave me so much clarity as to like what type of cognitive like ailments or mental disabilities or whatever you want to call them like begin to matter, and why for me, particularly as a fat Black person from poverty, from the hood, like who comes from a very Black Christian family in the Bible Belt. So I've been talking for a long time, sorry, but like yeah.
No, I relate to so much of what you said, especially the like feeling like I don't have common sense. Absolutely. It's me. Mikey, did you want to add?
Yeah, no, I've just been sitting here thinking about all of your experiences in the context of my own experience, because like the idea that I could be, or that I could have ADHD is something that's like relatively recent. Like I was diagnosed last year, and I think the only reason why I really got to that point was because like I was so wrecked by grad school that the coping mechanisms that I had sort of like used to adapt over time like just did not work anymore. And it wasn't necessarily because grad school was hard or harder than what I had been doing, because I had gone to school full time and had worked several jobs full time. Like it's not like grad school is hard. There's more bullshit. That's all it is. The real thing was just that like you can't live a high stress life forever. Like eventually you just snap. And it's so weird because even though like I've struggled with countless issues over the course of my life, and I spoke about this on Twitter I think like a while ago, but like for some reason I had it in my brain that I was like, oh wow, I've been through a lot of shit and I got out completely unscathed. So I like had this idea that I was somehow totally exempt from all of the pain and shit that I was dealing with, and that somehow kept me from really giving myself any care or help or doing anything to figure out like how I could not feel like shit all the time. And so like it really took me just like getting to grad school completely falling into a million pieces and then finding my way back from there to some sort of baseline where I could live day to day, which is part of the reason why I took medical leave. And like I'm really glad that I feel the way I do now, even though I think for most people this would be like sort of sad. But it's not that way for me because I've been living with such a high amount of anxiety about things that are, some things are in my control and other things are not. And like I've been carrying all of those things around with me for so long that like I just anticipate that I'm always going to feel like shit, and that is just like how I feel, and I'm not going to feel good ever. And so like that's part of the reason why it took me so long to get an ADHD diagnosis. It's also part of the reason why it took me so long to get a CPTSD diagnosis. And now that I know I have those things and I think about the experiences that I had growing up, it's like I see them in a completely different way now. Like, because I didn't fit into this like idea of the thin hyperactive white boy that all of you have already mentioned, like I just sort of thought that like, when I was quick to anger. Like I had such an anger problem when I was younger, like such an anger problem. I was constantly getting into arguments with people, constantly getting into fights. Like people were just like, oh, well, it's just that Black girl like being aggressive and like whatever. Like nobody, or because I used to keep my messy shit on the playground. When I was in classes, I was a good student. I was bored all the time, but I would like do all of my work and then read a book or something, and like obviously be extremely uncomfortable because of the ways that like fatness, especially things like chairs and desks being too small, like police your fatness, which we spoke about during our chair breaker episode. And like, so there's things like that. There was also the fact that like I've always been very impulsive. Like I'm not like doing all manner of risky things all the time, but like I do have very specific triggers that I've had to sort of work around over time, because when they present themselves, I feel like I can't not do that thing. Like when I was in high school, I went through about a 2-year long phase of like shoplifting impulsively. And that thankfully never got me into any like kind of trouble with the law or anything. But, you know, it was like the shit I was doing was not okay. I was also, when I was in high school, after my freshman year, when I got sexually assaulted, I was struggling with that trauma and I was holding that trauma. And I was like drunk half the time. I was either, you know, thinking about my next binge, or I was trying to starve myself for multiple days. I was fucked up. I was not okay. But like, anytime I tried to get help from someone, it's just like, oh no, she just has anxiety. She's just depressed. Like they're like, no, this is not a neurodivergent person. This is just someone who's like doing what teenage girls do, doing what Black teenage girls do. They get mad, they get into petty arguments, they do impulsive, stupid, reckless things that could potentially get them in trouble with the law. Like nobody took my problems or the things that I was exhibiting seriously. And I had plenty that if any one of them was exhibited by somebody else that did not look the way I do, it would be a very different response. I was struggling. The most I could get besides a depression diagnosis was a doctor saying I had bipolar. And then I was on a cocktail of drugs that had me conked out for like 2 years. To the point where like once I emerged from that, when I started college, I didn't know how to feel things anymore.
Yeah, the bipolar drugs are no joke.
They're a fucking trip. Like
they didn't give them to me because they don't give those to borderlines, but I know that they're no joke. They're really,
it's no joke. Like, and I'm just thinking about like I've always had mood swings. I've always been quick to anger. I'm an extremely impatient person. Like, and these don't sound like big things, but like it's to the point where like my life has been severely affected by those issues. And it's been a constant pattern over and over and over again, but I haven't even been able to see it because of how much fucking ableism that I had to trudge through in order to understand, like, no, Mikey, you're not just dramatic. You're not just this, you're not just that. Like, this is who you are. This is part of you. And like, it's taken an even longer amount of time, and I don't even know if I'm totally there, to feel okay about those things.
Totally. Yeah, I think something that's been hard about my late diagnosis with autism is the grief of, kind of like you're saying, all the missed moments. I was in therapy like as an adolescent, and like shit was like just not caught. And like part of that is like because of the ways I had learned to mask. Part of it was because of like the like emotional abuse I was experiencing at home, where I felt it wasn't safe for me to be honest with anyone, not myself and not my therapist, you know. And part of it is, I think in the past like 10 to 15 years especially, like so much research has been done into ADHD and autism especially, that has really given us so much more information in how it shows up in like AFAB and people of color especially. Something else I'm thinking about is like I saw this ad recently about like the ways ADHD can like impact your eating habits and like make you fat. Basically was like the framing of the advertisement, which was super fucked up, and I kept reporting it, but TikTok has still continued to show it to me. But it's interesting to think. I mean, that's like an interesting thing to think about, right? Like when I think about, you know, Mikey, you were talking about your impulsivity, and I'm like, yeah, I definitely like don't have a huge amount of impulse control, and I'm gonna eat like, you know, if I want a package of cookies, I'm gonna eat a fucking package of cookies. And you know, even like I've mentioned before about the ways that my practitioner told me about this new research that autistic people are like especially drawn to dairy and gluten for some reason, which I still like. That's something I keep repeating and without looking up, but it's something that I just find so fascinating. So it's like this sort of like, I don't know, chicken and the egg thing, and I just wonder like how many fat people have, you know, ADHD or autism, and what are the correlations and the implications, and how do we talk about this without pathologizing either of those categories, right? Because they're both neutral. But yeah, just the way that our embodiments like interact with these things. There's another podcast that I really like called, oh god, I'm forgetting the name of it. But it's hosted by a Black woman who's ADHD and autistic and a transracial adoptee, Sandra something. And she recently rebranded, but I'm saying all this because Brian mentioned rejection sensitivity disorder, which is something I've like processed a lot in therapy. You know, my therapist is very like anti-diagnosis, and so when I try to like, and like I get that to some extent, but when I bring up things like rejection sensitivity disorder, she's like, but Caleb, also like it makes sense that you would be sensitive to rejection because of all the ways you've experienced it so much, like racially, sexually, like intellectually, right? That like and I bring up this other podcast because she did a whole episode about rejection sensitivity disorder and how she's like, I don't really think that's a thing for people of color. Like, I think that's just like a natural response to just constantly being told that you're wrong. And so of course you're going to be sensitive to rejection when you haven't been affirmed and have actually actively been harmed and policed by these standards.
Also, isn't that, I don't know, to me when I hear that, I'm also like, isn't that simply just like a symptom of like a lot of different disorders too, like being rejection
like
sensitive?
Yeah, I mean that's
what I don't know, because that's like a part of borderline, is being like hypersensitive to
ADHD too,
abandonment and stuff like that.
I'm sorry, Caleb, were you finished?
I'm finished. I'm trying to figure out what the name of that podcast is.
Oh, okay. I wanted to like,
Deshaun, we have great social skills. Look at us.
No,
look at us just figuring that out.
Are you finished? Cool.
I didn't want to like disrupt.
It was cute.
I'm sincere. Okay, but keep going.
I was just gonna like talk briefly like about and Joe, I would love to hear about yours as well if you're you know, able to talk about it. My experience with being hospitalized for my depression. And I think that it's like just really important because I think that so many people don't. I remember, I don't know if it's still true now, but I remember like a few years back, there would be like a viral tweet every 2 days from someone like, y'all only accept depression and anxiety as like mental illnesses. You don't accept anything else, blah, 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 or something like that. And I'm like, hey, let's think about it. a couple of viral tweets about depression and anxiety is not acceptance, okay? Like, people are still dealing with so much with regards to depression and anxiety every single day. And I say all this to say, a couple years ago, I went to North Carolina. I left Atlanta and went to North Carolina because I had to have my second heart surgery. I've had 2 heart surgeries in my life. And I remember that summer, I was having like 3 or 4 panic attacks a day, like where I was having to like go to the ER several times a day because I could not control my panic attacks. It was horrific and it went on for months. And there was one night where I was just like, oh, I'm not gonna make it. Like, this is not gonna work. Like, I am exhausted. I remember like sitting on my mom's living room floor and like just bawling my eyes out. And luckily my mom just came downstairs, like, I think to get like some water or something to drink. I don't know. And she saw me there, and gratefully, my mom is also diagnosed with depression. So she gets it. And of course she just was like, this is my baby who was like crying out on the floor. She drove me immediately to the hospital to be checked in. And it was my very first time ever in this predicament. At the time, I want to say I'm going to guesstimate and say this was 2017, 2018. So I was around 2021. The first person I saw when I walked through the facility's doors was a police officer, fully dressed, with like his gun, his badge, everything. And he searched me to like make sure I didn't have any weapons. And he's like, it's procedure because, anyone can come in here with blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, this is already criminalizing people with mental illnesses, like, because you think we're going to walk in here and want to just fucking murder you or whatever.
Was it an adult facility?
Yes.
Okay. Because that's, I think, the biggest difference between our stories. Not the biggest, but a big difference is I was in an adolescent facility.
Oh, okay.
We were the same age, to be clear. We were the same age, but I was in an adolescent wing.
Okay.
Because of the way
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's interesting, but also I think that in a way that also really speaks to the way that people adultify
100%.
Black folks.
100. It was also 100%.
Because in retrospect, I was in there with people who were at least 20 years older than me. So but like that was my first interaction in like that space with this police officer. And then I was like forced to strip and then put into this tiny room with nothing, like no sheets on the bed or anything like that, which is also procedure or whatever. Like nothing on the walls. Like it was this nothing but like white center blocks and me. And they shut my door and there was like one tiny, like a little tiny square in the door as a window. And that was all that I had in the room. And immediately I was like, I will never open up about these feelings ever again because I feel like I'm being trapped. Like if my only option is get through it in my mom's house or be trapped in this tiny ass room, like I'm going to just choose my mom's house. And I remember, and this was like late at night, like 1 o'clock in the morning. The nurses were like, they had taken everything from me. So I didn't have my phone, didn't have my wallet. I had nothing with me in the room, of course. That was locked away in a locker. And I remember the nurses like just talking about me outside the room. And hours later, like maybe 6, 7 a.m., a psychologist or a psychiatrist finally came into the room. And the first thing she says to me is, "Oh, wow, you're a big one." And I was like, I don't have words. Like, I could not believe that was like something that had just happened. And then I had to spend time explaining my gender or genderlessness to her, explaining queerness to her, and explaining why it didn't make any sense for me to like be in this tiny ass bed that I couldn't fit in, with an officer who had to like search and strip me with his gun like on his holster, and then I had to wait for hours before anyone came to see me. Like it was honestly one of the most horrific experiences I'd ever had. And I remember her asking like, do you want to like stay here, or do you want to just leave? Because I wasn't on like mandatory stay, so I didn't have to like be there for 72 hours. At least I could choose if I wanted to leave or not. And at first I was going to like be there just for the 72 hours for it, like to really get my mind together. But after those 8 hours I was in there, I said, I cannot be here any longer. It was quite literally one of the worst experiences I've ever had. And I'm not even like detailing everything that happened in there. But like, that was one of the things that pushed me to being, I won't say an abolitionist, because by then I was already an abolitionist, but like understanding abolition beyond prisons, figure or literal prisons, because I had felt so trapped in there, like in that space, and so alone. And there was like not even any food. They wouldn't offer me any food because I was fat. And I just remember thinking, I will never come here again. Like, I will never come to one of these facilities again. So it's just like that for me was a reminder of all of the ways I had been treated for my neurodivergence prior to that moment, like throughout my entire life. That was also really like undeniably structured by, or like, yeah, that was structured by my Blackness and my fatness. And also in this case, like my transness, because there was no, like the psychiatrist had zero understanding of anything. And she was also like one of the coldest, like most heartless people that I had spoken to in the medical industry or in the medical field, where I felt like even if I wanted to like talk with you in this moment, you don't feel like a safe space to do so. And it was just very clear that like in that moment, all that was saving me from was the state's dime. Like, they don't want me to die in their facility. That was all that was about. And I realized like there's no way that I would ever go back to this place again. So yeah, just it was a heart-wrenching experience. And like I said, I've been diagnosed with most of my like formal diagnoses since I was a child, and have had thoughts about the like informal or like not formal diagnoses for ages. So I've had plenty of experiences with like really ableist, really anti-Black, really anti-fat like shit, but that was by far one of the worst. And I wrote about it afterwards. It was something that for me, I was like, this is easily like going to determine my politic now around fatness, disability, and Blackness. So I just wanted to name that as part of this conversation, because I think that people really don't consider like the ways that neurodivergence and like cognitive disabilities really do heavily impact and heavily interfere with like one's fatness and how we're treated, not just in like social space, but also in the medical field. Because despite feeling like we should be safe in like a medical field that's catered to like mental health and mental illnesses and cognitive issues, like so many of these doctors don't know shit about what they're talking about. They have no idea how these things affect us, because the only people that they've ever studied are thin, white, cis men. And so I just think that I always try to tell this story whenever I get the chance to, because a lot of people don't have these experiences and don't know what those things are like. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I didn't know that story from you. I hadn't heard you tell that story before. And like, I'm just so sorry that happened to you. And like, obviously there aren't words to like say like how fucked up the system is, because like my story is so different than yours. And like, I'm gonna tell it, but before I tell it, I just want to say that like every single thing I say, it's like it's because of my whiteness, my girlhood, and my class privilege that things went differently for me. And like, I think that like it's just so disturbing, because I think that like for me, like my experience being hospitalized is like actually like made it harder for me to engage in abolition more wholly, because I had such a positive experience being hospitalized and being taken care of in the way that I was, to the point where I didn't want to leave the hospital. Like after I was there for 5 weeks, and I cried when I left. I was like, I don't want to go back to world. I don't want to go back to the real world. The real world is scary and horrible, and I don't want to go. And I think that like basically like my time in the hospital was like, it was a buildup of like 3 years of really, really, really severe self-harm and suicidality and agoraphobia that I was experiencing because of like different traumas that had happened, like street harassment based, kind of my first year of college in New York, and different kind of stuff of that nature that led to like me really just like never going outside by myself. And if I was outside, I had to like call my mom on the phone, which obviously is not realistic ever, to the point where like I would call her and she would be like, are you walking somewhere? Like, why are you calling me? And I was like, yes, so sorry. But yeah, I had been self-harming, a big content warning, self-harm and suicide, just like for this next little chunk. But like, I mean, I started cutting when I was 13, and I hid it very, very well because I lied to all of my therapists growing up. My mom like caught me essentially when I was a senior in high school, and there was like discussion of me being hospitalized, but it kind of ended up being the thing where it was like, oh well, like you'll be fine, so we're not going to. And then I went to college, and then I experienced like a pretty severe traumatic instance of like abuse, essentially, or a verbal assault on the street. And I relapsed, and like because I was in a dorm and had more alone time, it like got a lot worse. And then the following year I lived alone, and so it got even worse because I was alone. And basically like that second year where I was living alone, my mom came to visit one time, and like there was like a big blow up, and basically like she found out that I had been like dealing with like cutting to the point where it was like I was putting my life at risk, and like had I slipped or like gone a little bit deeper, like I would have unintentionally unalived. And so that was kind of towards the end of my sophomore year of college, and we kind of made the decision together that I needed to go into like an intensive program in a hospital, but that I was able to like, because I was like being open about it, and because I had a therapist in the city, they were going to let me finish the school year, and then I was going to come back and then in Boston do not even a full hospital program. So I wasn't even living at the hospital. It was a partial hospital program, but I was there like 14 hours a day, 7 days a week for 5 weeks, and which was like very intense. And like I will say it was like really, really hard and like scary and horrible, but also like because I was in the adolescent unit, like I was also like one of the oldest ones there, and I don't know, it was just like so focused on like, it was a DBT program, which is like the primary treatment model for borderline personality disorder, and it was also in the self-harm like department. So most of the people there were people who had borderline or CPTSD, some eating disorder people, but those were kind of the primary things that people were dealing with. And then there were people who lived there as well, but essentially like the people who lived on the unit and like my experience were very similar. I just drove home at the end of the day. I was there for 5 weeks, and it was just like very intensive group therapy and individual therapy, and all the rules and regulations of like a regular hospital stay, but very like structured for what it was, as opposed to like I think like what most hospitals, when people talk about like hospitalization, they're talking about state hospitals. They're talking about hospitalization where like it's not separated by treatment model, it's not separated by age, it's not separated by gender. Mine was also, it was separated mostly by gender, but I don't think it was intentionally separated by gender, but it was like women or like girls and trans non-binary folks and some boys, but it was like boys who were dealing with self-harm, which was like not, just statistically it's like not as likely. But yeah, it's just, it's very, and it's so difficult for me also, I think, like looking back, because like when I talk about like my abolition politic and like when we talk about like abolishing like hospitals as like an extension of the carceral system, like I don't think that like my experience should be abolished. I think like what needs to be abolished is like Deshawn's experience, and like Deshawn should have had access to what my experience, because at the end of the day, like we all deserve that care, and we all deserve to be like seen and like held in the way that we can be in these times of crisis. And maybe that's a holdup for me in my abolition work, but it's something that I like struggle with a lot, because I think that like if I hadn't gone and done those 5 weeks in the hospital, I do not think I would be here today.
Yeah. No, that's, I think, so honest and so real. And thank you for sharing your story too. I think that these stories are very important to share. And I also think that I hear you on like the hold up around like that being a hold up in your abolitionist politic. And I want to offer that I think that part of the reason why you were able to have an experience like yours is because of experiences like mine, which is to say that like I think all of it has to be abolished because of the fact that the current iteration like only allows for these separate experiences, right? Like this current like iteration of quote unquote mental health care is specifically built to create like these vastly different experiences based off of race, gender, sex, class, etc., etc., etc. But I also understand why that would like be just such a holdup, because honestly, I think that if I had a different experience, I probably would have never grown my abolitionist politic in the way that it forced me to, because I only like it wouldn't have mirrored a prison for me, but my experience did mirror that. And I also just wanted to say that where I was, like, it was not separated by gender, but it was separated by age. There was like a pediatric side and then like an adult side, but everything else was sort of like fair game. It was like whoever's here is here. So like, yeah, and it was a state hospital. So
yeah, I also just think that like I think I also worry because of like the history of like mental hospitals and like asylums and the like history of them just getting abolished and just like dissipating, and then all the people in them being left to like rot essentially. And like I worry in our abolitionist like politic, like sometimes I worry particularly with mental health care, like I worry about the care in which we can offer people like reintegration and also like supplemental healthcare, like mental health care, because it's so different than like reintegration. I mean, I don't know if it's so different, but in my understanding and like in my in my thinking, it feels very different than like reintegration from prison, because you're dealing with people who have neurodivergence, who are maybe like on the verge of killing themselves today, you know? And like, how do you protect people who really do need protecting? Like, I mean, I don't know, for me, like I really did need protecting. Like I needed someone to, albeit that person was my mother, like, but I needed someone to come into my home and take away my razors. And
I
like,
think-
how do we help people, or I don't know, how do we help people sounds so savory, but like, what is the transition, I guess, is like my question.
I think one of the things that's like really important to remember is that a lot of the people who are incarcerated are those people who need to be
Yes.
protected.
I was going
right?
to say that.
So like mental illness is incredibly
Yeah.
criminalized,
Totally.
especially when you are Black, and it is one of the most easily accessible reasons to lock someone up. Just the act of being mentally ill in public is something that you can be incarcerated. It's a system that, again, I think going back to what Deshaun said, it's like the partitioning out of people who are criminalized by mental illness is what allows for a specific subset of people to have the care experience that you had. And so
Totally.
like, I think in thinking about abolition, it is impossible to go along with destroying or abolishing the carceral industrial complex without thinking about how will we care for people who are mentally ill, because a lot of those people are in jail and in prisons.
Yeah.
And so that's why, you know, abolition is just the beginning of redeveloping and reconstructing these systems so that we can give people the care that they need that isn't partitioned out of society and kept away out of view. But yeah, I think it's really interesting just thinking about both of your experiences in contrast to each other. I'm just like, and thank you for sharing the stories, because it's like, I hate how much of these incredibly important conversations are often hand in hand with rehashing incredibly traumatic experiences in life, but like, that's just sort of the name of the game, I guess.
And then there were 3.
And then there were 3.
And then there were 3.
Wow.
I mean, we'll
Yeah.
probably all end up hanging up soon too, but
We probably should wrap up because we've been at it for an hour and a half.
I know.
Yeah.
We really
this
have.
is such a good conversation.
I appreciate you both talking with me through this, because it's something that it's just such a weird experience, like having such a positive experience of like hospitalization in the way that I did. And I know that like I said, I'm like acutely aware of how my whiteness and how my class were the reason for it. And yet obviously like it's the kind of thing where like as like Deshaun, like as my friend, I'm like, I wish you could have been there. Like, you know, I'm like, I wish you could have been held in that way.
Could have had such a fun time, besties.
Besties. Like, you know, like we could have been besties in group
it's
together.
true.
Like, you know, and I think that like, especially for like younger adults, like that kind of care is so important for people who had like traumatic childhoods, and like, you know, having this care that is like intensive but outpatient, so it's not carceral, but it is, you know, it I don't know.
Yeah.
Bestie.
Yeah, bestie. I know.
I know. It's just so sad.
Oh my God.
It's just so hard. It's hard conversation, huh?
Yeah.
But it's
All
like,
right.
it's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is very.
You want
Go
to take
ahead,
us out,
Mikey.
Jordan? No, I was just gonna ask if Jordan wanted to take us out.
Yes.
Whoa. Okay.
Responsibility.
Are you ready, folks?
We're so ready.
Okay. I'm pulling it up. Hold on. Okay, wait, let me get my microphone ready. I'm just pulling my microphone closer. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Email us your questions and thoughts at
Jordan, you don't have to hold the microphone so close to your mouth.
I like it this way though. Email us your questions. Email Mike.
Start over.
Email us your questions and thoughts and feedback at unsolicitedftb@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at unsolicitedftb. And until next time, watch your mouth.
Watch your mouth. Yeah, yeah,
Watch
yeah,
Watch
yeah,
it,
yeah.
watch it.
Watch it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm done.
Ooh, pecan